Okay, Ben, once he's in the left ventricle, has to go through the aortic valve, and then the first two branches off of the aortic valve, or right after the aortic valve, are going to be the coronary arteries. They are called the left on the left side and the right on the right side. So the left coronary artery has two branches which will feed the heart muscle. They are called the circumflex artery and the anterior interventricular artery. On the right side, there are two main branches. They are going to be the right marginal artery and the posterior interventricular artery. So the way that I always thought of the heart is it's selfish. It's the one doing all the work, so he wants to get the most freshest, recently oxygenated blood. So if you think of Ben, once again, Ben made it through the lung, he made it back to the left atrium, the bicuspid valve, into the left ventricle, the aortic valve, and then Ben has to go up the ascending aorta, and then he'll go into either the right or left coronary artery. If he does do that, it's a very short trip. He's just going to go up a little bit into the left coronary artery, and in this particular case, he'll go into the anterior interventricular artery, and he's going to dump off his oxygen to the heart muscle. Once he does that, he has to return back to the right atrium. And if we go to this picture of the heart, which is on the back side of the heart, Ben dropped off his oxygen. He then has to go back to the right atrium, and if you look here, you can see there is the great cardiac vein, the middle cardiac vein, and the small cardiac vein. These are the three major ones that will all dump into the coronary sinus. And of course, the coronary sinus is going to be the third method or the third route that blood would get into the right atrium. So to put this all together, and there's a picture where you can actually see it on the back side of the heart. If we put it all back to my thing here, Ben, if he, doesn't matter where he went, but he has to come back to the right side of the heart. Right atrium through either the superior, remember, it's only one of those. He can't split and go to all three of them. So that's the biggest mistake that students make at the beginning. That's why I've invented Ben. Ben has to come back one of those ways. Below the diaphragm, it's the inferior vena cava. Above it, it's the superior vena cava. And if he took a really short trip, he's going to come to the right atrium through the coronary sinus. Once he's in the right atrium, he can drip down through the tricuspid valve, because an easy way to remember which side gets which is you're going to try it before you buy it. So tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, through the pulmonary semilunar valve, into the pulmonary trunk, into the pulmonary arteries, into the lung, and then once he picks up oxygen, he, through one of the four pulmonary veins, will go into the left atrium, through the bicuspid or mitral valve, into the left ventricle, through the aortic valve or aortic semilunar valve, into the aorta. If, let's just say, he wanted to go someplace else and he went into systemic circulation, he could then go to a hand, but once he dumps off his oxygen, he would have to come back to the heart through the superior vena cava, because a hand is located above the diaphragm. He would then have to go through the right side of the heart, the right valves, the right pulmonary valve, into the pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries, lung, pick up oxygen, and then he'd go to the left side and he'd repeat that. So Ben has a boring life. Not that you want to think of him as having any life, but every time he goes someplace and dumps off oxygen, he has to return to the right atrium and repeat the whole process again and again and again and again. And so the idea to think about this is, although the heart is going to have the same amount of volume pumped in both the pulmonary and the systemic circuit at the same time, the pulmonary circuit is very short and it's a low pressure circulation. It doesn't have to go too far. That's why the walls are this thick versus the left side, which has to pump it from that left ventricle all the way up and around and all the way down to your little toes. So that's kind of the way that I always used to think of it, in the sense of it's coming back each time and it has to go pumped to either the as far away as possible or to the short one. As I mentioned before, the coronary circulation is the shortest one, and the only time that your heart can get that blood is during diastole, which is the relaxation phase. Systole is the contraction phase. And so one of the things you got to keep in mind is when your heart is pumping really fast, let's just say you were just downing monster drink after monster drink, and all of a sudden you're feeling your pulse and you're tacking your pulse rate up to 150 beats per minute. The only time that your heart muscle will get the oxygenated blood is during that split second when it's completely relaxed. So people who have heart conditions and are taking drugs that will accelerate their heart. When I was a kid, a lot of people took amphetamines to lose weight. You would lose weight, but your heart would just be racing. So that means if your heart is racing, you are not getting enough oxygenated blood to the heart muscle, and it can cause a problem. This particular one here, the heart receives 1/20th of the body's blood supply. If, for example, one of these arteries are clogged or blocked with plaquing or something like that, you may have what's referred to as, right here, angina pectoris. You're not having a heart attack, but because you are not getting enough oxygen to the muscle, you are essentially feeling chest pain. You can get the chest pain from working out. You can get it from stress, if anyone's ever stressed. Or you can have chest pain from the bottom one there, which is called a myocardial infarction, but basically that's just called a heart attack. It is a prolonged coronary blockage, and it's where areas of the muscles of the heart are going to become scar tissue, which means they're not contributing at all. They're just going to go along for the ride. And let's just do one thing here. If you remember back to AMP1, this thing over here on this side is cardiac muscle. These little lines in the cardiac muscle are called the intercalated disc. And I like to think of them as like little speed bumps. If you think of this as a road, here's a little speed bump, here's another speed bump, and another speed bump. If you remember, a lot of the slides that you had did not always show the intercalated discs. But the intercalated discs ensures that the heart muscle contracts as a unit and relaxes as a unit. And that's called a functional syncytium. Wherever we get that, oh, here it is. So you want for the heart to contract as a unit and relax as a unit. Otherwise, if it hiccups at all, you are going to have heart problems. I thought we used to have where it said functional syncytium. There it is. All heart muscle contract as a unit, and that's called functional syncytium, or they don't contract at all. If they're not contracting at all, that's not good for pumping blood. So anyway, that's the pumping story of a heart. The electrical portion is a lot more intense and complicated. That's good.